night may be long and the dark may be deep, but the answers are there to be found. Whether it's the normal, the abnormal, or the paranormal, you're in the right place. Let's go beyond reality.
Welcome to the show. It's Beyond Reality. Welcome to another great evening as we get underway with our, I guess I would call it our final serious program of the night. The Friday night show, of course, Booze, Brews, and Bros, is not necessarily serious. We have a lot of fun. It's just not serious. So welcome to the show. Anyway, it's great to have you all along. We have a very interesting topic on tap for tonight. It's about 5G. Our guest will be Ben Stewart. He'll be talking about the technological innovations that 5G will bring, but also what threats and risks does it bring. I want to make sure that you know where the YouTube channel is because I need you to subscribe. If you haven't subscribed yet, go to YouTube, search for JV Johnson, and make the subscription thing by clicking the icon. It's free. There's no charge. Just do it, please. Also, our Twitch channel gaining a lot of steam. You can go to Twitch and find us at JV Johnson. And when you do that, you just follow. Or there is a subscription option which gives you a lot of perks and benefits. And if you have Amazon Prime, you can subscribe for no additional fee. Just use your Amazon Prime account to support the Twitch subscription. And let's see, have I covered everything that I like to cover? Podcast. Of course, we have a podcast version of the show, and it's available on all major podcast distribution platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and others. So if you're a podcast fan, that's a great way to enjoy the program here and the interviews that we have. I did want to mention on the YouTube channel, we've got at least 500, maybe 600 back episodes available for you to listen to and enjoy, all for free. Please support the program. Go to patreon.com/Johhaw. That's Johhaw. This is going to be a fascinating discussion because we've all been hearing reports of the benefits of 5G, of the risks associated with 5G, of the benefits of artificial intelligence, of the risks of artificial intelligence. Plus, we're living in a world right now that is far different than it was even just a few months ago. Our guest tonight, Ben Joseph Stewart, is a filmmaker and a musician. He makes audiovisual art for the conscious community. Before his touring rock band Hero Sonic disbanded, Ben had already launched his third full-length documentary with global viral attention, including Esoteric Agenda, Chimatica, and Ungrip. Ben, welcome to Beyond Reality. It is a real honor to have you here tonight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So I just have to ask you about a few of these things you did. First of all, did I pronounce the name of your band correctly? Is it Hero Sonic?
Close. Hero Sonic, like hieroglyphics. So It just stands for sacred noise, sacred vibration.
So as a musician, what role did you play in the band? Guitar player? What were you?
I was a singer, songwriter, and nice. We did some composing our music ourselves using Pro Tools. So I was also doing a lot of the composition and the structure of the songwriting. But yeah, we toured pretty heavily, and I was just mainly the singer on stage.
Oh, that's a lot of fun. I'm actually a musician myself, so I can appreciate that fully. I write and I record, and I've done a bunch of that stuff myself. I keep thinking that maybe back, when I made career decisions, I should have spent a little more time trying to become a musician. But now I look at the music industry and I say, wow, it's a tough business right now.
Yeah, I would say back in 2002, I got into my the most recent band, Hero Sonic. And that was when people were buying CDs. And then shortly thereafter, that just wasn't the case. And Spotify and Napster and all those things really changed the landscape. So, yeah, you're right.
I have to ask you, do you think people appreciate music less when it's so readily available? You basically can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, whether it's on your smartphone, your computer, in your car, whatever it happens to be. It's all always available. It seems to me that makes it a little less valuable, or maybe just less appreciated.
Yes, that's a good point. I'm not really sure because, I think that, the music industry is so young. If you think of it in human terms, it's so young.
Yeah.
And it's going through all these iterations with the advancement of technology. And so I think maybe some people who remember the old ways kind of miss the simplicity of, remember when you used to get an album and it had a cover and you used to hold it in your hand. Nowadays it's a single with an image, and maybe it's a moving image, and it's just a different kind of landscape. So I can't really say what the people today appreciate more. I'm 37. I remember holding CDs and even cassette tapes in my hand.
Well, I'm a little older than that, and I just broke my turntable out of the mothballs, set it up, and I've actually been doing a weekend show here where I incorporate the turntable and I play 45s and I play albums. And I actually, just to give you a little of my background, I owned radio stations for a very long time as well. And every station I bought had already made the transition to at least CDs, if not complete digital audio. But they'd always have these archive of albums that would be in a basement somewhere. Some of them just, ruined because they've been damp or whatever. But I always harvested them, not always for the vinyl inside, but because of the cover art. It's so cool.
It really is. I always appreciated bands like Nine Inch Nails and Tool. They came after that, vinyl revolution, in the CD era, but they still really appreciated that thing that you hold in your hand and the cover art, the inside art. It's a craft that, you don't see as much anymore, and especially now post-coronavirus, it just seems like everything is further moving digital and leaving the other world.
And I know we didn't schedule you to come on to talk about this topic, but I do enjoy talking about it a little bit. And one of the things that I really like when it comes to album cover art, I love old, like 50s, 60s, and even into the 70s country artists' cover art, because it's so sincere and it's so basic, and it's just, I don't know, it's heartwarming in some way.
I feel you. I mean, like I'm thinking back to some of the ones that I've seen, but for some reason my mind keeps going with Henry Dilt was this photographer, and he did the Morrison Hotel stores. Mm-hmm. He also did, I think it was Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Maybe not with Young. It was the cover where they're all on the couch on the front porch. Mm-hmm. And it's iconic.
Sure.
Yeah, and those types of simplicities, like when you used to just see the band sitting there, but it was just such an iconic pose or an image. I miss that kind of stuff now too. There's a lot more of the Photoshop and the I wouldn't call it gimmickry, but it's it's the flashy stuff that you can add on top of it, which also kind of takes away from just the simplicity of snapping a pic, and that's the image.
The introduction I read when I brought you onto the show here, mentioned that you make audio-visual art for the conscious community. What is the conscious community? It's really,
that's my call out or flag for a specific kind of demographic. And it's because, I'm a musician at heart, but I really moved deeply in the middle of my being in a band into making independent documentaries. And that just took off into its own life form. And I was making all the music, all the soundtrack for it. I was doing the voiceover. I was doing the editing. So it was a nice deviation into a different kind of way of putting all of my art. But yeah, so the conscious community, I guess I would say, is really, man, it's such a broad topic, but the ones that I'm talking about, the ones that I would call my tribe, are the ones that understand that we're here for more than just survival, and we're here to thrive. Art is a huge part of that, and I think the conscious community seems to get that, whereas we may not all agree on the little things, but the really important things, like understanding the importance of community, understanding the importance of even the simplicity of touching the earth, of getting back into nature, of remembering some of the old ways where we used to get together in person. Remember that, and
That's right.
Dance around the fire, maybe hit a few drums, play a few songs, use our voices. In a sense, commune with one another in those ways. And so, that to me is my call out to that tribe. The conscious community are those that they're thirsty for knowledge, they're thirsty for new kinds of art, new ways of expressing one another, and always looking to learn and grow. That's who I would say the conscious community is.
You also have taken quite an interest in researching and talking about new technologies and things like artificial intelligence. How did that start for you?
Yeah, I mean, my interest in artificial intelligence specifically, it began years ago. I think one of my favorite books that's come out recently was with Andrew Smart, and it was called Beyond Zero and One: Machines, psychedelics and AI, I think, or consciousness. And it was really just kind of talking about the differences, whereas before there was this old idea that, like you can never replicate biology with technology. And I think a lot of people were kind of maybe missing what thinking machines really are. Like, they don't have to think exactly like us, but they think nonetheless. This thing called Google Brain is an example of that, where its sole purpose, its genetic makeup, if you will, the algorithm, has an adaptive gene on it, which I think all humans do. We're here to adapt to whatever the new environment is. And so I think the thing that got me into technology and really looking at it is the more I began accepting that, okay, maybe there were all these like naysayers saying there's no way you could ever get it to think or be intelligent or be anything like us. I think there was a big, a blank spot in our vision to see that, but they are thinking in certain ways. And then the more I started researching how technology is being used today, I started finding out that, like let's say in China, 123 cities are smart cities where they have city brain, and basically that's an Alibaba-produced algorithm that lowers traffic, and it's just constantly monitoring that. But it's not all that it does. It does quite a bit more, and as we move into this new world, it's going to do quite a bit more, just because technology is about to start communicating with other technology without our input far more than it already is. It's already doing that, but we're talking about a quantum leap into a different kind of world. So once I started realizing that this isn't just a fascination of a subset of the world, it's really the direction that the entire world and the economy is really focused on. So when I started realizing that, okay, this is part of a much bigger game, a much bigger agenda, a much bigger fascination with humans, private, public, national, independent, whatever it might be. This is the direction that everything is going, and it's also driving directly into the heart of something I've always been into, and that's just discovering what is consciousness. How are we conscious beings, and how do we bring more consciousness into our lives? I find that fascinating. So it's funny that leads me directly into my fascination with technology.
We kind of jumped on this train in a full commitment manner when I think smartphones started to become an essential, or at least an integral part of our daily lives. And I don't think there's any turning the train around, but who's driving it? Who has picked this direction for humanity that has decided? Usually it's consumer demand and consumer trends, at least for our nation, which tends to drive the world economy. But I'm not sure that that's where this is coming from this time. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, this time, specifically when talking about this time, we're talking about the jump in generations of telecommunications technology. So if you think back, 1G, the first generation of telecommunications, was that brick phone. Once you got to 3G, past the Razors and the Nokias and those smaller, that was 2G. 3G was the beginning of the smartphones. 4G is where we have the much better smartphones that we have right now. And 5G, it's different, because you're right, consumer demands, that's a huge part of the ecosystem of, let's say, impulse that drives this innovation. We're making all this technology because people want it. And in 5G, I think it's just we're getting closer and closer to the other side of that pendulum, where it's not just the people, because a lot of people are speaking up, and most people are just used to getting the next generation of telecommunications and the next iPhone or Android or whatever it might be. We're just used to it now. Now it's part of we're already like nodding our head to the song, if you know what I mean. We're already into it. And so I think the big drivers that we're talking about now with the jump from 4G to 5G are the major telecommunications industries around the world. Now we're talking, big telecom is bigger than big pharma, and I think big ag maybe combined. I'd have to check on that. But it's a really, really powerful industry. but it's not just one organism with a few people at the top. We're talking many different factions. So China is far ahead of the United States, supposedly. According to some people, they're far ahead of the United States in 5G technology, and that's why there seems to be just such a race in the United States to catch up. Because, if you look back through all the revolutions, you had the Neolithic, the Stone Tool Revolution, all the way up through the Industrial Revolution, it's getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Every time we have a revolution, we just had the information revolution. Now some people are saying this is the augmented era, the artificial intelligence era, but we're moving quicker and quicker into these things. And so I think that the driver of this is quite a few different private industries. Some in China are not private, obviously, but I think it's these kinds of interests. And there's a lot of, there's just so much media now around 5G on both sides. The really excited, the really scared of it. And I know that there's a lot of, I know this is an inflammatory word, but there's a lot of fake media on both sides.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is being driven by competitorship. It's very easy to see that. But there's also this confusion aspect of it, where when there's too much of the fake, then it's really hard to parse what you're actually looking at. So in all of my research, I can throw a bunch of names at you, like Huawei, obviously AT&T, and just go on and on, all the way into what Africa or what China and the U.S. are doing in Africa with telecommunications. I think it's these companies, but then I also, I come from a conspiracy background, so there's people that I used to connect with that are saying now, no, it's even smaller. It's smaller and fewer hands that it's actually being controlled by, and it's just the illusion of there being all these separate companies that are thinking independently. So I got to be honest, the deeper I look, the more I feel like I'm understanding what it is, but who's driving it is still slightly a mystery, because there's about 3 or 4 very active theories going on out there.
You brought up China. You've mentioned China several times already, and China seems to be the center of many conversations that revolve around many controversies, especially recently. But let's talk about China from a technological standpoint. Here we have a nation that, 30, 40 years ago was almost a third world country. And suddenly they are becoming a technology leader. Now, my first question is, when it comes to 5G or some of these advanced communication technologies, are they responsible for developing and discovering these technologies, or have they pirated them from elsewhere and become leaders in their production?
Well, that's a very good question. So that's part of. So if you look at Jeff Brown's work, he did a really good interview actually with Glenn Beck, and in his interview, basically what he was saying is that Glenn was asking, well, why does it seem like China is so far ahead of the U.S. In 5G technology? And he said, well, they're farther ahead in some ways, but they don't have let's say the steering wheel in their own hands, or it's not their foot on the gas pedal, because apparently, and I'm forgetting the exact number, but I think it was somewhere around $300 billion came from China to basically plant people in U.S. and other countries, but in U.S. companies, specifically around superconductors and, semiconductors, and obviously, computing, and to take that technology, to take the IP, and basically bring that back to China. And there have been many cases where people have pointed the finger and said that that's happened, but apparently there was $300 billion put towards that. So some people are saying the only reason why they are so far ahead is because they got really good at copying at the world and using their, let's say, cheap labor to manufacture it far cheaper in a way where, 1/3 of all the world's manufacturing really comes from China. So when they notice a disturbance, so does the rest of the world. And we saw that in in the fallout and the quarantine of the coronavirus. Now, the interesting thing about this debate, like, how did they get so far ahead of the United States? Some are saying that, and I do believe some are saying that they are where we're going to be, the U.S. is going to be in 2025. They're basically like 5 years ahead, but it's almost like it grows almost like in dog years at some point, because if you're ahead, you're also growing faster.
Right.
So there's that factor, and so it can get kind of convoluted, but in a way, I really feel like that's been one of the main focuses of, let's say President Trump. Even before he got into office, he was talking about, we need 5G, we need 6G, and we need it quicker than China. So there's really interesting things around that. I think there's more at play than just China in the U.S. here, but it is quite interesting that there, again, this year, 2020, has been quite revealing. And I mean, if you think of 5G, basically China is the first to fully blanket a city with 5G, and it's not just doing that. It's the Internet of Things is coming alive, where more so there's more security cameras there, there's more surveillance, there's more algorithms that are great with facial recognition that are basically tracing every human who is in their city. They have a map on, they know what they're doing. It's creating data points, and it's not humans surveilling it. It's actually this Alibaba and various other algorithms that are monitoring and observing human activity and creating massive wealth of data. So, I'm sure big data is bigger than big oil, and that only recently, within the past few years, happened. But here's the thing. It's going to, I believe, exponentially grow in that direction for two reasons. One, we keep moving towards that. Everything we do, every technological jump, like 4G to 5G, is going to produce its own data within its own data. So it's not just every time a human does something, your data gets shared with these data companies. It's every time your computer talks to your refrigerator or talks to the chip in your child's diaper or a pill bottle, right? This is what we're talking about. Everything like these are going to be talking with one another. So there's that. And then also it's, big data is getting bigger than big oil, because I'm not sure if you know, but like Zoom in 9 years, I think it's just ridiculous how big of a company they've gotten. All of a sudden, it's, because of the coronavirus quarantine, they became bigger than, I think it was the top 12, maybe top 14 airlines.
And when you say
there.
Bigger, you mean as market capitalization? Is that what you're talking about?
That's what it looks like. And
Yeah.
this is specifically coming from Valuetainment on YouTube. So that's just something that I learned from there. But what it seems like is the world is also, like we were talking about with music earlier, it's pushing more into the digital world, and maybe people aren't traveling as much. That'll probably come back to a big degree, but who knows if it'll return to where it was before.
Yeah, I think a lot of speculation is that it won't return to where it was before. At least many of these industries that have been hit hard by this coronavirus situation won't return for a decade or more. What a lot of people are speculating.
Yeah.
When we talk about China and the fact that they manufacture a third of all manufactured goods in the world, I mean they had, and I'm not sure we're here to talk about China specifically, but I find it amazing that they came into the world marketplace with labor costs that were a fraction of the developed world, with no environmental regulations that most of the rest of the world contends with, which makes manufacturing more expensive, with a lot of the hurdles that an American company would face not in existence. So they was that an intentional effort on their part, or were they just in the right place at the right time?
Well, I mean, here's what I would say. I think this goes back farther than most people's, let's say, ideas of how far it should go back. I mean, I think it goes all the way back a couple hundred years, and what's been brewing this entire time, you can look at it economically in the past 30 years, which is really interesting, because if you do look at the past 30 years, they went, I think, I'm forgetting the exact I think it was 1978, the average, I think it was the vast majority of China's population was living on $2 a day.
Yeah.
And it turned around just after the turn of 1980, and then they've been on the rise ever since, and now they're the number 2 economy that we're looking at. And so the interesting thing with that is that's what's called Thucydides' trap. I'm not sure if you've heard of that, but basically Thucydides was one of the first historians, and he was saying that it was the rise of Athens and the fear that it instilled in Sparta that made war inevitable. And if you basically, Thucydides' trap was proposed by a scholar more recently that basically said out of 16 cases where there was a superpower and then another power rising swiftly through the ranks, that 12 of those 16 ended in war. And so that those odds don't look great when you're looking at what's happening between China and the U.S., but, you know, the way that I look at it and the way that you explained it, where they don't have a lot of the hurdles that we would have, you know, it is quite interesting. And there's people like retired Brigadier General of the U.S. Air Force, Robert Spalding. He believes that China really is this big global problem that we have to deal with, and they're kind of opening up of their, the strong communist side that they've had into being a little bit more part of the global economy. He's saying that was part of their trap, and that this has all been a big part of their ploy.
It's like a Trojan horse.
Personally, I don't know that, because I've heard several disagreements with that hold some weight, and I don't think that we can just say China is the problem. Obviously, that's a little bit too much of a blanket statement, but were they planning this, and was it not a beautiful chess move? If that's what it was, I mean, it was delivered perfectly, because look where they were 30 years ago, look where they are now.
Yeah. I see it kind of as a Trojan horse. You know, they kind of pretended to be something, and yet all along the way they cheat a little here, or deceive a little here, or lie a little, whatever it happens to be. And again, that's not our focus for our conversation. Let's turn this to 5G, because, you know, we throw this 5G term around a lot. And other than thinking it's the next best technology for cell phones, what exactly are we talking about when we talk about 5G?
Yeah, so 5G, again, the big idea is that, 3G to 4G, all those jumps, that was all just faster phones. And really it will totally be a faster phone, but that's just like the tip of the iceberg, and we're missing the bigger point here. We're talking, it's going to be 100,000 times faster, meaning 4G is a garden hose of information, where 5G is the channel that can hold an entire car. So we're talking massive bandwidth difference. But in order to do that, it's not going to be done in the same bandwidth. We've already saturated the bandwidth, or the frequencies that we're using for 4G. So now the technology needs to turn into a different frequency. So it's high band 5G, which is, you know, when we're talking about the ones that are the concerning frequencies, we're talking from 20 gigahertz all the way to 100 gigahertz. And so the frequency is different. And that also means that it's a smaller, more rapid wave, and it can't penetrate what the longer, slower waves could in the 4G world. So in the 5G world, now you need to have a bunch more infrastructure loaded onto buildings in the city, onto light poles, existing whatever, and then also all these satellites up ahead, and thousands of satellites going up. And this is from many different companies. But the biggest thing that I see that I think people are missing when we're talking about 5G, in China, it's a huge jump in surveillance and tracking, and AI surveilling and tracking people. It may not turn out to be exactly like that here in this city, but we also have this thing called Agenda 21, then it turned to Agenda 2020, then it turned to Agenda 2030, and that's what we see now, but it's called sustainable development, where everything is turning smart. So where you had a smartphone, now you have smart watches, smart cars. You eventually have smart cities, and that's what city brain in China is. And that's, again, 123 cities in China, whereas here you take all of our cities and you turn them into smart cities. They do miraculous things. Like they can, if you have a self-driving car, it will lower traffic. The algorithms that are monitoring traffic will lower your traffic time by, let's say, 15%, and that's incredible. And your car knows if it needs to put air in the tire. Your refrigerator knows if you need ketchup. Your pill bottle is telling you if you need to refill your prescription. But it's not telling you that, actually. It's telling the grid, the 5G grid, that. So what it's doing is it's communicating on your behalf, and Amazon eventually, with predictive shipping, will be like, okay, your refrigerator is getting low on these products. We're just going to ship it to you. And statistically, if less than 5% of our products get returned to us, we're still making a profit. So what we're talking about here is a different world where the thinking that we used to have to do is being outsourced. So a lot of those pesky tasks, like, oh man, I gotta fill up the refrigerator, and then I gotta pick up this from the pharmacy, and man, I can't keep this all going in my head. Well, you actually have the computers doing that for you, but the fear that people have is it's the same thing that people have always feared when it's technologies being this supposed liberator, but it's it could potentially take over, turn into an iRobot or a Terminator situation. That's like the far out extreme. But the very next level of it is where there's a digital imprint of you now with pictures that you don't even realize you're in, footage you don't realize you're in, your voice on microphones picked up in a city that you don't realize was ever picked up, all a part of what the computers know about you now. And that shouldn't be much of a problem. Like, if you're not a bad person, you got nothing to hide. That's what a lot of people hide behind. But the thing is privacy changes when we're talking about this. And most people don't know where their data is going. They have no idea how it's being used to sell you products, or if eventually that data is going to be openly shared with police departments or a bot that's looking for crime, and it just happens to see something sketchy about you. Again, if you're not doing anything, maybe it picks up nothing. But this is the 5G world where there's a lot more computers thinking, creating data, communicating to other computer systems without human input. So what we're talking about is really we're launching into that futuristic world that we've been watching in Hollywood all along.
And what is it about 5G that makes this possible? Is it the fact that so much more data can be transmitted and received through this system versus our current technologies?
It's that matched with the fact that we are there with certain kinds of technologies. Like, so we have such good facial recognition software at the same time as we want to go to 5G to open up more bandwidth, get more data transferred. So these advancing technologies are helping us figure out some of the problems of slow advancing technologies. And that could be algorithms, like algorithms that are there to figure out how to make better algorithms. Machines that are there to build better machines than we could. And I think really, what we're talking about is 5G is from 2020 right now all the way to 2030, I think the world is going to change more in this decade than we've seen in the past 100. And I really mean that. It's going to be so drastic and so dramatic, but it's also because this is a meeting point of a bunch of different factors. We have increased bandwidth. We have these satellites. We have the, let's say, the geopolitical situation that can allow for intercontinental and international communications, data transfer. We're able to communicate ideas and thoughts to people around the globe better than ever in history, as far as we know. And we also have the technologies like Google Brain, that it's an algorithm that its sole purpose is to figure out what you like and to produce more of what you like so it can keep more of your attention longer on the Google platform. We have other algorithms that are there to figure out your facial expressions, to know what you're feeling, to lip read, right? We're talking about things that humans can do, but now every computer that has a camera that can look at you can do what the most supercomputer can do because it's connected to it via the grid. So, this is what we're talking about. I think I talked about it on a show on Gaia with George Noory, where imagine a drone, and it's not the size of a drone, it's the size of a gnat. It's the size of a tiny mosquito, but it has really good cameras, really good voice recognition software, face recognition software, and it can hover around you, and you have no idea that this little thing has the intelligence of, Deep Blue, which is one of the most, if not the smartest supercomputer out there. So that's what we're talking about, because 5G will have such amazing fidelity, such real-time transfer of data that you will never drop a call. You can download a 3-gigabyte film in less than 2 seconds. You can have holographic images in front of you that aren't jittering like you see in Star Wars when Princess Leia shows up. It's not jittering. It's real-time. It's crystal clear. You can hear everything like it's right there. That's what we're talking about, and that's what all these... when you hear about the Internet of Things, what you're talking about is all these devices that we have now are communicating amongst one another, and also with the ability to maybe at some point in the next decade begin replicating themselves without needing human input, if you will. Like they will have, when I say an adaptive gene, I mean in their algorithm, they're meant to adapt to whatever this world throws at them. So they can begin replicating themselves according to whatever constraints. Like, oh man, we don't have graphene anymore. What can we use? Oh, well, now we can graphenize hemp, and it's far cheaper. Well, a computer will figure that out far sooner than a human will. So we can't even conceive of what changes are going to happen this decade. That's why I think 5G is so huge. We can't even conceive of what this decade is going to look like at the end of it. But I think you can rest assured that there will be massive, I wouldn't just say job losses because that's a scare tactic, or maybe not a scare tactic, but it doesn't show much of an upside. I think there will be massive economic transformation in the human concept of what it means to work and where value is derived, what part of our living on this planet and doing things and building things is valuable. I think that's going to change. Now you might see people's social media status being more correlated towards how much money they have in their bank account in that kind of respect. And we're moving into virtual reality, augmented reality, where there's going to be people walking down the road and they're having full-on conversations. Oh, we're already there. People have these little earbuds and they're just having full-on conversations. But we're going to get to the point where it's not even humans they're talking to. They're talking to their phone, it's translating something, and it's going out. And then they're getting a news feed at just the right speed. It's like so fast that no human can speak that fast, but it's just fast enough for you to understand it. And it augments itself based upon whether it's picking up that you don't understand anymore because it's going too fast. It can potentially slow itself down because it realizes that you're having a different thought and you're not focusing anymore. This is what I mean by we can't even conceive of what technology will be available to us and what that will mean for human consciousness and humanity as a collective in 10 years.
Wow, I mean, you've said so much in that answer that we could take this conversation in any one of 20 different directions. One thing that I do want to address, though, is this privacy concern. I mean, right now we have people freaking out, and I'm one of them, frankly, because if I happen to search for, I don't know, garbage bags on Amazon, when I log into Facebook next time, everything's about garbage bags. And I know that they were monitoring what I was doing, and they're feeding me all these garbage bag ads, which is exactly what the garbage bag companies want them to do, and they pay for that. But that in itself is a bit of an invasion of privacy. People get upset about that, but you're talking about something that's 100, maybe 1,000 times that.
Yeah. The privacy thing, honestly, I would encourage people to look up Tom Scott. He talks a lot about advancing technologies and what these engines and search engines, but he's all about the engines. And when he's talking about this, he has this entire talk called "Privacy is Dead 2030." Now, that's a profound statement, and it's a profound way to label a talk that you're giving. And basically what he's saying is that, and he's not putting it in this words, I will. He's basically saying that, in order for the machines to know exactly who to connect you with intuitively. So social media might be to the point where you're intuitively, by the computers, by the machines, being connected with specific people that might fall into what you like. So it's like the best Tinder algorithm, but about anything. And we don't know how that can be manipulated in that sense either. But another thing about that is, you're right. You can search for something on Google and then you'll have an ad. But have you noticed that you can just talk about something around your phone, and strangely enough, there's also an ad there?
I was going to ask you about that because other people have reported that. I haven't noticed that myself, but maybe I just haven't been paying attention too closely. Is that a real thing? Are our smartphones listening all the time and using that information to, at this point, pop ads into our browsing?
I believe absolutely yes. I think that maybe some people who don't experience it, maybe not everyone is getting targeted. And it could also be like, some people, they click on more links that they have no idea what they are. And back in the day, your computer would get a virus. You'd eventually find out. It would start glitching out or something like that. But then they got better and better. And I think a lot of what seems completely harmless, and actually the link will take us to a place that gives us exactly what we're expecting, but in the background, maybe there's some kind of spy software. Whenever that program or that app is open, they're allowed to access your microphone in the fine print even. Sometimes it's not in the fine print, but I believe it totally is. And when we're talking about privacy, again, I think that this decade is going to bring us surprises in what that means. Like, what does privacy mean? Because a lot of people are saying, we want more open source. We're tired of big industries and big corporations hogging all the money, hogging all the great technology, absorbing all the smaller players as they're starting to get a foothold in technology and products and whatever it is. But then you look at the fact that, I even look at it as, when the internet when all these devices start becoming aware of one another, who knows if they don't view our privacy as a thing, right? If it starts getting to the point where the computers are able to make decisions on their own, potentially privacy would be the first thing to go. And I think in this decade we're also going to notice a lot of, because everything has moved digital, and now there's more cameras than ever, there's more tracing programs than ever. So what we're talking about is this computer system is going to know a lot more about every single human, whether you have a phone or not, whether you throw away your phone and try and, avoid any technology. You can't help it. You walk through a park and somebody's talking on their phone. Well, there's a camera pointing directly at you. Now, those aren't always activated, but, if we move into this world where there's a company that could profit immensely by, turning on everyone's camera at a certain time every single day to gather more data. That's just a rough guess of how it would be done. But again, I don't know how it would be done. I just kind of feel that privacy is definitely going to change in this decade. And I think that also goes towards there's really good software that checks out biometrics that can see, okay, now it's checking out your posture. It's checking out your facial expressions. And there's a rhythm and a pattern to how even cops can tell whether you're authentically smiling or giving a fake one. Well, even kids can kind of tell. Dogs can tell whether, you're posturing to attack or posturing to play. And so, of course, computers can. And eventually we may get to the point where the computers know more about what's going on inside other people's heads than they're even being honest enough with themselves about. So imagine if you can turn that technology around, and I want to know what that person's thinking based upon their posture, based upon, any of their biometrics that this camera can pick up on. And in those ways, I think privacy is also going out the window, because at that level, who's to say what's going on inside us isn't showing somehow on the outside, in our voice, in our face, in our posture, in the people that we're talking about? Because computers are already finding out, not to drag this on, but in California, there's an algorithm that just has mapped and accurately predicted who is depressed based upon who doesn't experience as much depression, based upon how far they travel to get their groceries. So there's these little interesting things that you wouldn't realize, but very, very accurately based upon Facebook likes or based upon just a certain small number of data points, computers are able to accurately predict that 95% of these people are going to look like this, or they're this tall, or they're of this descent, or they like this kind of music, or they are more into Hello Kitty than not. These are all data points that are being discovered. And they say more about us than even we could figure out sometimes. So that's the privacy. When we're talking about the collective, it's a whole different ballgame, because these computers are thinking in collective terms as well, and they're categorizing us. So now we're getting into a situation where, what kind of job we'll get, it's not about going in and doing any kind of interview in person. It might be in the future, it's just going to check all of our social media, all of our data points, and it will decide, an algorithm will decide whether we're good for that job or not either. So are these good things? Are these bad things? Or is it just change, and people fear change? We really do, en masse, we fear change. All of this could be great. Actually, all of it could be utopian. But if you look at the past however many thousands of years, we haven't had an example of a utopian civilization. We haven't had anything we can see. There's always been war, there's been famine, there's trafficking, there's all these things that we find disgust in. So we would hope the computers decide, to help us make what we would wish to have, a much more fair and just world. We would hope that these machines and the jump to 5G is really going to push us in that direction. I think that we need to get involved a lot more, and more innovators and movers and shakers need to get involved a lot more. And Elon Musk has been telling us, we really need to take a look at this AI thing and slow down on it. And then in his last Joe Rogan podcast, he was basically saying, if you can't beat him, join him. So that's why he's making things like Neuralink and doing all the things he is. And I think he's a genuine guy that has genuine concerns. And honestly, I don't think it's as simple as being able to say any one country or any one organization is causing this problem. I think we're still in the middle of this race for a global superpower. The United States has been it for a while, but that doesn't mean it will be that forever. And I think that 5G scares many people within the United States, because there just happens to be a country that's a little bit ahead of us, and that country is also, came through the ranks. So, to me, that's the way that I look at what's happening in this decade with privacy, with technology, and in a sense where I think we need all hands on deck to figure this out, because it's not just the health issues of 5G, but I haven't even covered that. We haven't even got into the massive potential health risks. Some people say it's just a conspiracy to slow down U.S. 5G proliferation, and some are saying, no, that's fake news by the telecom companies telling us, oh, it's completely safe, don't listen to the conspiracy theories, let us do our 5G thing. So, do we listen to these dozens and dozens of very accredited doctors that are saying this is not conducive to health, right? It sticks in your tissues, it can cause hemorrhages in your blood-brain barrier, it can cause reproductive issues, it can burn the skin, you can do things like make invisible force fields or 5G fencing. is something that I just heard about, and I still need to do more research on it. But, I mean, this is nothing that anyone was talking about even in 2010, 2012, 2013. It's a brave new world. It really is.
Yeah, and a lot of people in our chat rooms are asking about the health issues related to 5G. And we're going to get into that on the other side of this break we've got coming up. But I've got just one final question as we talk about the privacy issues here of this new world that's ahead of us. Does American-style privacy and civil rights have a place in this new world?
Well, say that one more time. American-style privacy?
Privacy and individual rights, what we've been used to for 200, almost 50 years.
Are you saying is that a thing of the past, or is that rapidly changing?
Is there a place for that in this new world?
You know, there's a fear of that, and before I give my understanding of that, I'll just tell you one thing that many people that are connected with me. I have many feeds of people sending me different kinds of info. And there's a lot of people that say that one of the big pushes here, especially right now in 2020, and which has got everybody talking conspiracy when it comes to why did the coronavirus thing happen, why was there a global lockdown, why are there all these riots in the U.S. afterwards, is to introduce a little bit more of China into the United States. And that has been the fear of some people, that there's an infiltration happening. And it can go silently under the guise of, no, this is just foreign, commerce. That's all that is. But, when you're talking about major U.S. industries in bed with industries in different countries, then there's always that worry, well, is this a Trojan horse? Is this treason from within? I think it was Marcus Cicero that said, a nation can withstand its fools. It can stand attacks from the outside, but it can't withstand treason from within. And I think that's a lot of what we're actually dealing with. Is our U.S. privacy going to be a thing of the past, and sovereignty and all of that? I definitely think it's changing. I wish it weren't, but I definitely think it's changing. I'm the type of guy that I would love to say, you know what, if you don't like what's happening in the cities, find a piece of land outside the city and just, live out in the sticks and be away from all the Wi-Fi and the EMFs and stuff like that. Well, you can't get away from it in the 5G world. You can't even take a boat out into the middle of the ocean because there are satellites up ahead, and there will be so many satellites. And what some people like David Wolf are saying, they're not all satellites. Some of them are like high-altitude weather balloons with 5G technology in them. So we're talking about a world where, no, you can't get away from it. If what I'm researching is correct and it's not, fake and fabricated, because I'm going to as many sources as possible, yes, a lot of it is changing, and I do think that there are good people in the U.S. that see this and wish to stop it, and they're in powerful positions. And so I do think a lot of what's happening in 2020 is a silent war. It's not a war of bombs and stuff like that. It's more of ideologies, and dare I say, in biblical terms, dark forces and principalities is what we're dealing with. I hope that a little bit more of our old ideals of, not just staying conservative and never progressing and never changing, but being a little bit slower to it, because we don't know what this technology does. And we don't have transgenerational studies to say, it may do nothing to me, but what about my children? Now, what about their children and their children? We really don't know. But the thing is we are beings of frequency. All of this technology is emitting frequency that is, at present, unknown and potentially very harmful to us. It can't be neutral. You can't just pump 100 million times more EMFs into the environment and have no effect on humans. I just find that to be as ridiculous of a statement as you can get. So it's not neutral, and on top of that, we have no clue. There's a lot of science saying it's very dangerous, and we'll get to that. But I think a lot of what America stood for is going to be a thing of the past if we do not demand control over the way technology gets implemented in our cities, because eventually we won't have a say anymore if we keep letting it go this direction.
Tonight we're talking with Ben Stewart about 5G and new technologies, among other things. Ben, before we get back into this 5G discussion, and I want to start talking about the health risks that have been discussed about 5G when we come back to that. But before we do that, tell me a little bit about your films.
Right on. Yeah. So in 2007, when I was still in my band, that was when I decided I'd just gotten out of the military, and when you're in the military, you can't make public statements about politics or anything like that. So as soon as I got out, I made a documentary where I could just be very forward with what I thought, and that was called Esoteric Agenda. And that was really just kind of mapping bloodlines, mapping the way our perception and the way we track time has been distorted or at least changed, and just all the little things that we could be deceived by in our world. That was Esoteric Agenda. Then right afterwards, what I did at the end of that was I realized, I don't want to be a conspiracy documentary maker. I have to put a twist ending to it. So I put this really metaphysical and empowering ending to Esoteric Agenda. And then people were asking, because it became viral, I had no clue of what viral even meant. This was 2007, Google videos, YouTube wasn't even really a thing. So it went viral. And then people were asking, well, can you make another film that's just basically all like the ending of your last film? And so I did. I made another film. It was called Kymatica, and it really got into mass psychology, how we project our inner problems, our hate, our fears, the things that we don't understand. We project them onto other people. And so we can play out the theater of our subconscious on the world around us. And that was a big hit then, because that really got people looking more at what they can do and empowering, oh, man, that means the solution is really in me. I need to have an awakening to who I really am, instead of pointing the finger at, wealthy people, or elite forces, or, whatever it might be. And then the very next film that I made after that was... he's an individual, Rob, in the Paget family. He was up in Canada. He started learning about law and realizing a lot of the things, the documents in law, they attach you to the system in a way, and he wanted to sever all those ties. So he gave back all those documents. He wrote a letter to the Queen. He basically quit his job, and he moved off onto this property, built his own Earthship with his family, and became completely off-grid. So I did a film on him, and what's interesting is his life has just now changed. That was back in 2011, and 9 years later, he's now finally traveling around in a circumstance where people are like, now I get why you were doing what you were doing back then, because there's so many people trying to move off-grid literally right now that he's traveling around Canada just going and helping people do that. So those are my first three films, and that really set the stage for me eventually going and working at Gaia and doing Psychedelica, which is a 14-part series on plant medicines and shamanism. And then I did a show called Limitless, which was me speaking direct to camera, and that's on Gaia.com as well. And that's the culmination of everything that I am really about, which is human potential. Because no matter any of the issues that I see in the world, I don't think any of them are bigger than the human consciousness that is meant to overcome these problems. I don't think this is by chance that we're facing what we're facing in the world. I think it's exactly what we need to rise to the occasion and awaken in the right way. And what I mean by awaken is also to heal from a lot of the trauma that's been inflicted upon us just by a system that it's not complete. I won't say that the whole system's corrupt, but I will say that our educational system is incomplete, the way we raise children, the economic system, what it asks of its people, it's incomplete, and it's not 100% highest potential. So that's pretty much my whole discography of all the different film stuff that I've done.
Some great work there. Just if someone wanted to seek it out, what's the easiest way? To go to Gaia, or where would they go to find most of this work?
Yeah, well, I mean, you can find all of it if you go to benjosephstewart.com. And because I also have the stuff that you can't access directly through my site, you have to go to Gaia, but I have the links there on my site to show you all of my works, all the film, and even the music that I've been doing, and the blogs, and also now there's a mystery school that I've started, which is a members section to really start using the arts as a way of awakening and also helping other people go through awakening processes. And what I'm not just talking about mystical awakenings. I'm talking about realizing you're in a world you didn't realize you were in. There's byproducts to that kind of awakening. That could be traumatizing. So go to benjosephstewart.com. That's where you can find everything that I'm doing.
Let's talk about the health concerns about 5G technology. This seems to be a steamroller that's going to come regardless of whether or not we want it. And as you pointed out in the beginning of the conversation, there are a lot of great reasons to embrace this technology, but there are a lot of people talking about health risks. What are some of the more substantiated, at this point anyway, health concerns that people are discussing in regards to 5G?
Well, yeah, so when 5G is understood as also being a different frequency than 4G, then what we really have to look at is these are a whole new slew of effects that we're talking about. So there's general non-ionizing radiation effects that people have been talking about for a while, and it's been contested by many people, but that's all in the lower bandwidth. Now when we're talking about upper high band 5G and also the new technologies, it's not just about the frequency and how people are now having like microwave hearing where they can hear it in their head, and it's actually an interference pattern of the electrical signaling of the brain. There's blood-brain barrier leakage. There's issues in the tissues, in our dermis and epidermis layers of our skin. That's where the millimeter waves are getting trapped. So potentially, I don't know what that's leading to, but that seems to be in the tissues where it gets trapped. It also gets trapped by rain, and millimeter waves gets picked up and trapped inside living tissue like plant tissue in animals. So we're also talking about biodiversity outside of us. But, some of the other things that we're talking about are reproductive issues. And in children, like for us, we're a little older. It actually won't affect older people as much, but it will have a much more harmful effect on children. And, people that are still going through the development of their organs and their brain and their teeth and their bones and things like that. I could go through a laundry list of all the other things that seem to be caused, but, anything you want to find out, if you go back and you look at the declassified document of Project Bazaar in the 1980s, they were doing studies back then to show that these frequency waves, you can induce any of 5 emotional states: fear, lethargy, panic, rage, and I'm forgetting what the other one is, but these are things that can be induced that is well known. These are psychological effects. So we're not just talking about all the physiological damage that might be happening, all the inflammation that it could cause in the body. And then inflammation leads to things like neurodegenerative diseases, gut issues, you name it. Inflammation seems to be the cause. So it's unknown right now because we know that it's affecting the human organism in some way, but we don't know all the byproducts of that, like what those effects, like inflammation on its own will cause its own effects, and that's not the 5G causing it directly, it's indirectly. And so some of the other things that I think this is the biggest hope of it. When we're talking about the harms, there seems to be tons and tons of harms. Dr. Arthur Furstenberg, Dr. Martin Paul, even Robert F. Kennedy Jr. are all talking about 5G as like, whoa, we need a lot more studies before we can roll it out at this level. And Martin Paul is one of the leading people saying this, and he's even saying that, listen, we could take the same concept and do it far smarter. We don't need your cell phone pinging the towers every 30 seconds. Only when there's, maybe every, 30 minutes or however you set it, but we should be able to set how much your phone is pinging the tower, because that's always producing more. Now they've got this new thing called beamforming, where it's not like a beacon that goes out everywhere. A signal just goes in 360 directions. Beamforming signals you out. It singles you out. Let's say you're a mile away from the 5G box, and it singles you out, and it sends a message or that data, or that millimeter wave directly at you. So this has got other people that like, wait a minute, are these weapons? Are these energy-directed weapons? And now they're going to be in satellites. And now they have cameras that can see all the way to the ground. They can thermally image. This is so that's getting back into the privacy thing. But like when we just stick to the potential harms, there's people saying that if it's done smarter, millimeter waves can actually be therapeutic. And that's because there's a certain time of the day where your body doesn't mind being overstimulated, because that's a part of life. You go out, you learn, you act, your body gets broken down a little bit, and then you sleep and you repair. And so while you're doing your thing during the day, you're meant to get a little bit inflamed, because that's a part of adaptation. We adapt to our world every single day. But the issue is now these signals are flying around. Nobody's getting a really good, solid night's sleep, especially not if you're in the city, unless you have Faraday fabric, which is an EMF-blocking fabric, all around your bed, even under the floor. And sometimes that doesn't even 100% do it. But, the fact that we even have to think of taking this, magic mesh fabric and wrapping our beds in it just so we can get a good night's sleep, these are the concerns that most people are having. Because imagine, like, if you can't get a good night's sleep or fully repair, then you're talking about anything and everything is making you more sick, because you're just not sleeping. You're just not repairing what life naturally does to you by just being a human, metabolizing, breathing, all those things you need to repair from. So that's when I'm saying we have a health concern here, I can't put it loudly enough. There is a huge health concern, and I'm not saying that it's dangerous. I'm trying not to incite fear, but what I'm saying is let's be realistic. We are now about to go and double, sometimes even triple in cities, the amount of EMF-producing technology that exists in there. Tell me that's not going to make a difference in the human biological field. It has to. There's no way that it can't. And we already know it's changing migration patterns of birds. It's killing birds. It's killing bees. It's killing a lot of the microorganisms and all of the insect and all the biodiversity that makes life lush and also possible. So we're talking about this could potentially, let me just put it the way that everybody ends all their 5G statements with when they're giving a concern. In 10 years, we won't be here anymore if we keep going as fast as we're going right now, putting up all this technology. It's not just we're going to be sick. Martin Paul, Dr. Arthur Furstenberg, they're saying this is such an existential crisis that this is the extinction event if we don't slow down and figure out what this technology is really doing. Because by their studies, they're saying this is an extinction event level move that telecommunications companies, these private and sometimes not so private companies, are deciding on our behalf. And now you want to go on social media and say anything about 5G, you want to go and say anything negative about 5G on YouTube, you're going to be pulled quicker than quick. I've experienced that. Everyone's experiencing that. Wow. So imagine that. You can't even question it. You can, but you just can't do it in a format where the world is going to hear it anymore. So this is the concern we're facing.
Sounds like we're all going to need foil-lined clothes, something along those lines. Where does we've got obviously people that are real proponents and industries telling us, and anytime you go to an official website or messenger and ask them if this is dangerous, they all say, no, it's not. Where are they getting their data from?
Well, so I want to be fair about this because, in a sense, my entire MO is not pointing a finger. It's really just finding the solutions. And sometimes you have to kind of know who to know what. But, where are they getting their data? Well, they're doing tests. They're conducting tests, just like Dr. Martin Pall and Dr. Arthur Furstenberg. They're researching and they're gathering their data. And, do you know how big tobacco, like the big controversy around how big tobacco basically was able to keep using the same tactics that they were using to sell to kids for quite a long time because of plausible deniability. Like, oh, well, the science is not in yet, or there's no conclusive science to say that cigarettes are actually bad for you. So we have this gut feeling, and we're like, come on. You mean to tell me that, like, cigarettes, you can't say conclusively that cigarettes are bad for you, so therefore you can keep advertising them to children? This is the same kind of logic that I see potentially being applied by the telecommunications company. I want to be fair and say that I'm not saying that 5G is definitely dangerous, because I can say that I use a lot of technology and I don't deal with the effects that some people say they're dealing with. However, 5G is not highly deployed in the U.S. the way that it is in some places, and it's not highly deployed like it will be in 2025. So where are they getting their studies from? Well, they're getting their studies from science. I can guarantee it that, and money's going into it, and it looks completely legit on the face of it. But the thing is if you believe at all that it's possible to simply cover up negating evidence, like if they have an agenda, like, well, wow, we really want 5G, but you know what sucks? It doesn't seem to be tested enough, and there are some people who are testing it and saying it's not safe. Well, we have billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, riding on this. We also have a potential national security problem, and that's why I think China's being played up so much right now. That's where I think that's how you can have so many telecommunications companies saying it's just a conspiracy theory. That's it. Look no further. This is completely safe technology. There's nothing that we can find that in our science that you should be concerned with. That's great, but like if you look at it on the face of it, it really does seem like it could be a conflict of interest, and you're not allowed to talk about it on social media. You're getting people being deplatformed and demonetized just for mentioning 5G in a way that's like, maybe we should look at this a little deeper. So how are they getting their science? I really don't know, but I simply assume that they're able to make such a definitive, it's safe statement by possibly omitting some evidence or just saying, well, that's not conclusive enough. Yeah, that looks dangerous, but we don't know if you conducted your study well enough, and it's going to take us 5-10 years to do our own study, and by that time we're all going to be, in 5G heaven. So that's the concern. Again, I'm trying not to fearmonger here. I'm just trying to be like, whoa, let's put on the brakes. And if enough people, and it looks like Connecticut, and some other places are like, whoa, let's put on the brakes. But I've seen that before too, where some politician is like, you know what, we're not going to have it in this state, and then all of a sudden, a year later, they're either not in office or they're just nodding their head yes to it. So, like, again, I'm an independent researcher. I research all day and all night, but there's got to be things that even haven't come across my feed as to how this fits together in a grand agenda. All I can say is it smells possibly like an agenda, and it smells like there might be a conflict of interest, and it's just a whitewashing of anything, saying anything to the contrary of its safety is just whitewashed. So there's where my concern lies.
I share that concern, and not just about this topic, about many topics that get removed because they don't happen to jive with the decision makers at YouTube or Facebook or whatever it happens to be. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about 5G and coronavirus. There's, there are rumors and discussions circulating that there was some connection between the two. Do you know of any connection? Is there any reason to think that?
What's funny you ask this is I've gone through a couple evolutions of this. So when the coronavirus first came out, there was this video with Dr. Thomas Cowan, and he was basically saying, guys, every single time there's been a major flu or pandemic, ever since the Spanish flu in 1918, there was a leap, a big jump in the amount of EMFs put out into the world. Radar, just different kinds of radiation waves that were put out all across the world. And that's how he said, this was in Dr. Arthur Furstenberg's book. I'm forgetting the name of it right now. But in his book, he's basically saying how in the Spanish flu was the same virus seemingly popping up in places where there's no way it could have traveled from this place to that place or across, this big of a landmass in time to infect it the way that it infected. And that's when the theory started really getting out there. Even Rudolf Steiner was talking about it. All of this proliferation of these EMFs, which back then, oh my God, like that's a fraction of what we're dealing with today,
right.
More than 100 years later. So the connections that people were kind of placing on it seemed kind of interesting at that point. And then I looked deeper, and then there were some questions and a lot of people saying, like, okay, so, well, if 5G causes coronavirus, then why aren't Petri dishes of human cells all across the country in labs because of 5G just naturally getting the coronavirus? And so then I looked at that, and in a way I kind of just got caught up in that logic, and I was like, yeah, honestly, so I don't think 5G causes coronavirus. But then, to be perfectly honest, again, I have to look at alternative narratives when I'm trying to be balanced. Then I started looking at, well, what is the coronavirus? How do we test for it? How do we know that the people who are said to have coronavirus actually have that thing instead of sharing the symptoms? Like, it looks like coronavirus. Maybe it can get documented as it. And even Elon Musk was saying something like, okay, you have a hospital and there's massive layoffs, and then you can bring in $15,000 if you put somebody on, or if you document that somebody has coronavirus. If you put them on a ventilator, you get $37,000. Well, that's a way to keep somebody and one of your employees employed. And so I get those little things, but there was a lot of controversy around, like, we don't even know what the coronavirus is. That's what some people are saying. And then there's others that are like, no, that's completely nonsense, this whole idea that when you're testing for something like the coronavirus, what you're testing for are antibodies that could also be present from other kinds of flus or other kinds of issues, may actually just naturally be occurring in our bodies. And then you're going to, what was it, Morocco, Zimbabwe? I'm forgetting, but it was an African nation where apparently the president was saying, we've taken coronavirus tests and we've tested mangoes and found that they're positive with coronavirus. So then, and I even had somebody today hit me up and tell me that one of my last statements on I don't think 5G causes coronavirus, he was like, you have a very paltry understanding of what these doctors are actually saying. The way that it's getting documented is showing that when we're saying 5G causes coronavirus, no, 5G causes what's, and this is what I'm just paraphrasing what they've said, 5G and these EMF, the pollution in our body because of these millimeter waves and because of EMFs is causing for cells to basically excrete exosomes or excrete basically these, I'm forgetting what they're called now, but it's basically the antibodies, and it's the things that you would test for to say, okay, this is coronavirus. So to me, I think it's possible. I'm back to saying that it's possible, and I have a lot more research to do on this, but I've gone through several evolutions thinking that, okay, yeah, maybe it's possible, and then, nah, it doesn't seem realistic enough. Maybe that's part of the fake media. And now I'm getting people contacting me saying, oh, no, it's back. This theory is back on because you didn't understand it correctly. And I'm also having to navigate, me personally, that I have a lot of people emailing me information. I could potentially be having people intentionally email me wrong information that just seems very logical. And tell me that the data companies don't know who I am. Like, they know who everybody is, and they also know that I'm making films and I'm doing interviews on Gaia, on Coast to Coast AM, on this program. Obviously, like, I'm on a phone right now, and we have technology that can not only see an image of a handwritten word and translate it into a different language immediately. It can obviously take voice, translate what it's saying, find keywords like 5G, coronavirus, and tag that person.
Right.
So, in this world that we're living in, it's very hard to say, but that's what I have to say about 5G and coronavirus. I'm not sold on that it is, and I'm not sold on that it isn't causing, what we would call coronavirus. And unfortunately, I have people saying, like, I think you're just falling into any logical train that people are sending you. And I'm like, no, this is how I'm staying open. I'm Socratic in this sense. This is how I'm saying, it could be, so I'm not closed off to it. But it also might be fake. And so to me, when you can argue over the fine minutia of it, and most people have nothing that they can actionably do about is it 5G that's causing coronavirus or not, then people just have to move forward in their own lives as best as they can. Keep yourself healthy. What do you know? Like, let's go back to the drawing, back to the original building blocks of health, and say that no matter whether it is or it isn't causing it, we really do need to start focusing on human health a little bit more, because if we thought that disease was on the rise in the 1900s, well, like, in this century, it's going to be quadrupled, maybe even 10, 20, 100-fold. Who knows? So that's what I have to say about 5G and coronavirus is I really don't know, because there's so much media out there that's contradictory.
And not to pour gasoline on this fire, but isn't there a Wuhan connection to all this?
Wuhan was the first place to fully blanket their city in 5G. And another thing I didn't mention about 5G is I'm not sure if you heard that there was people just dropping in the streets supposedly because of the coronavirus.
Yeah.
There's people that were sick, and then they would just drop. And the thought is that the way that it was reported, it seemed like these people weren't just getting woozy and having to sit down, and that's what they meant by dropping, but literally all of a sudden dropping to the ground. And what some people are saying is what upper band millimeter waves can do is interrupt oxygen uptake into your cells. And so there's this, I think her name's Kate Sheriamani, or I might be getting her name wrong, but she was saying that this is what she believes, that it's actually these millimeter waves that are causing for some people, and this could be, why is it not everyone's dropping to the ground? It could be the beam-forming technology, and maybe, who knows, maybe they're experimenting on, well, let's just pick this guy and see if we can make him drop. Or maybe it is actually like, a freak thing. Somebody is a little bit more susceptible to it, or they walk by a 5G box. But it seems like oxygen uptake is another issue, not just the oxygen in your lungs, but every cell in your body and in your brain. And that could cause you to just drop to the ground out of the blue, And, who knows what other symptoms could be caused that's like, oh, yeah, it still looks like coronavirus because they're running a fever. And just so you know, in Wuhan, China, there are cops walking around with these heads-up visors. It looks like they're wearing a RoboCop helmet. And these visors can not only pick up what citizen they're looking at, but it's also thermally imaging them to see what temperature they are. Do they have a fever? Eventually, this is my guess, but those heads-up visors, obviously, they're not just going to be thrown away as soon as the coronavirus is dealt with. They're here to stay. It's high technology, and it's going to be added to eventually to the point where, well, if there's tracers inside vaccines, they can see who's had their vaccines and not. They can see who's on their medication and not. Now, I'm speculating here, and I have to be honest with that, but I don't think that's ridiculous. If we're looking at where technology is at, I don't think that's ridiculous. And so, yes, the Wuhan connection is They are very advanced in 5G right now, to where you can walk out your door and say Uber, and a car comes and picks you up, an Uber car. And you didn't say it into a phone. It just, the city listened and obeyed and sent you an Uber. And then you say to the car, whether there's a driver in it or not, you say, take me to whatever restaurant and get me this food. And when you get there, the car has already told the restaurant when you're going to be there, what you want. Oh, we're here, we're in the parking lot, and then they'll come out, they'll give you your food and take you home. That's just the beginning of what we're talking about. That's, again, the 5G world. That's right there in Wuhan. And obviously that's where the coronavirus, the level 4
bioresearch laboratory. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the lab there in Wuhan, which is 5 miles from the meat market where supposedly the thing came from, that's all in Wuhan. And there's something about Trump also calling this, this is the Wuhan virus or the China flu. And I think, to be perfectly honest, and I'm just going to speculate here, I think many people in politics actually obviously know quite a bit more of what's going on, but it's just classified, and maybe they can't say to the public what's really going on between China and the U.S. Maybe they can't be honest about it. Maybe the whole stay-at-home quarantine thing was less about we want you safe. Maybe it was more about we don't know how this is going to play out. Now imagine why all the facial masks, why the 6 feet apart? Well, if you walk into any Walmart, maybe they want to try out all their cameras with their retinal scan technology instead of facial recognition. Well, let's see if we can pick out who people are when their faces are covered, just by what their eyes, just by their retinas, maybe by their gait cycle and how they walk soon enough. And now expand upon this further to say in the U.S., right after the coronavirus thing, which was weird enough as a world event, now we have military on the streets, something that hasn't happened before, something causing a lot of controversy. Yeah. But why? Why, if there were another explanation other than the riots, why did we have to have a stay-at-home order, this quarantine thing for a couple months, and now there's military on the street? Who knows? I mean, I could just be putting together patterns that really don't fit together. But here's the thing. I have learned not to trust just about any source of media, and that allows me to say, okay, I can trust it, but I really need to be an adult and use my discernment to know, when President Trump makes a statement, is he allowed to say what's really going on? Is he really, when he's answering questions, I feel like this with a lot of presidents, when they're stumbling over their words, sometimes maybe it's because they're thinking of all the litigation they need to, everything that they were prepped before their speech. Don't say this, don't use this word, don't mention anything about this, focus on this. And they're trying to answer questions from reporters that are poking and prodding, and they're like, oh, man, how do I answer this? So I think we have a lot more questions to ask about, 5G. It's not just about technology and getting data around there quicker, but it's also about how is media proliferated? Is any of that media fake? And if it is, which we know it is because data aggregators like Cambridge Analytica and more, they actually have services that are fake news and disinformation. So they have it as a service, meaning that's a multi-million-dollar industry. They definitely have videos that are being made, but how do you identify them? How do you identify fake media when there's so much media around there? And we know that these are services that data aggregators are using. So they're probably going to be some of the viral ones. They're probably going to be very well done. They're probably going to be very convincing. They're probably going to be on site at the riots quicker and, filming the right stuff more, and causing for people to think something's happening in the world when it is, but maybe it's not happening for the same reason that they thought it was. So all of this could be social engineering. And really, if you're talking about conspiracy, the deepest conspiracy is not letting anybody even understand what they're up against, or that an enemy is even at the gates. right? We could be deluded the entire way through, thinking, well, I don't get into conspiracy theories, and I think the world is exactly how they tell us it is. I think that's possible. I just also think that it's possible that that's just a way that we make ourselves feel better because we're in a world that we haven't studied enough. So, that's what I think the China connection could be. That's what I think all of this posturing in 2020 could be. But I also have to say that I could also be very, very wrong about all that, just to not get anyone up in arms.
Our time is running short here, but I do have a couple more questions I want to get to. Give us an idea of what you think the world looks like in 5 years, in 10 years. How long before we see this total transformation of our way of life due to these technologies being introduced?
Yeah, I think in the next 2-3 years, we're going to actively see it. I think that's what we're seeing right now, all the job losses. I think this is preparation for a massive economic change in the next 2 to 3 years. I don't know if you knew this, but it was over 2,000 CEOs, maybe more than that, stepped down from their position just prior to the coronavirus thing really escalating.
Oh, wow.
And that was at all throughout 2019 that happened. I think there's a major economic shift coming. I think driverless cars and driverless industries, such as trucking, which is the biggest industry in the U.S., or at least the most common job, these things, within the next 4 to 5 years, it's going to begin the transition. When are we going to have only driverless cars on the road where you're not allowed to be a driver on the road because cars are going so fast and it's all controlled by the grid, and you can't trust a human slow, reaction speed? I think that might be by 2030. And when are we going to have private drones, like a drone just the size of a car, but you're flying like the Jetsons? I think that might be in 10, maybe 15 years, could be sooner, because technology, as it accelerates in the way that it accelerates as well. So, man, those are just a couple of the things, but I really think, look at Hollywood and the way that they've imagined it, and you can rest assured that those producers and those directors have been talking to tech people, and the tech people who are building future technology are the ones probably talking to Hollywood. So I guarantee that a lot of the types of technologies and the way that technology is going is already shown to us in Hollywood. We're going to have people with little earbuds and flying around in drones, where they talk to their earbud translates it to the message that needs to go to their refrigerator, their car, flush their toilet, whatever else it might be. But then again, we won't need to tell the toilet to flush. The grid will do that. And I think that's what the next 5-10 years look like. But I would say the biggest shift in human consciousness is also coming. And that's primarily going to be based upon how the economy changes, job losses, and universal basic income, where, okay, well, we need to keep people alive, and if we still consider that money is a thing, and now there's millions and millions and millions of people on unemployment, maybe billions, not just on unemployment, but just there's no such thing as unemployment. People are just getting universal basic income. That's going to happen this decade. That's my bet if I had to put money on it.
Wow. So when we first started this conversation, I got the impression, and I think justifiably, you were excited about the opportunities that 5G and the technology presents. The second half of the conversation, you started to sound some alarm bells. Do you sway to either side?
I am an opportunist for good. That is my spiritual philosophy. So I think that everything that is being built right now, we don't need to tear it back down to the ground. Some of it might need to be, that's just an expression. I think that we're very close to having the type of technology that we'd love to have without the health hazards and without the privacy issues and the spying and the I don't know where my data's going, I don't have control over it, that type of thing. Obviously, those are concerns, but, I'm not on some crusade against 5G. I'm not against technology. I think it's naturally what humans are here to do. I think we've been on this pursuit of technology for hundreds of thousands of years. I really do. So I'm excited, and I also don't think that any of the external problems out there are bigger than what humans can solve. But that's where I think what we're dealing with is on like biblical proportions. We need humans to go through an awakening, a spiritual transformation where we realize that what we do, what we acquiesce to, and how we acquiesce to it by voting with our dollar, voting with our decisions of who we support, whether we know what Amazon is about or Alibaba, that kind of stuff. I do have concerns, but I think it only takes a few adjustments for this to be a much smarter grid. So I've had a lot of people saying that, it sounds like you are supporting 5G and you're supporting all these things. Yes, but let's be honest. I don't support anything that is unfair to people based upon their race, religion, economic status. Of course not. I don't agree with anything that harms human physiology and causes birth defects in future generations. Obviously not. However, I don't think we need to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and I'm not going to be the one to say where to draw that line, but I want to be the voice of reason. AI can be an incredible benefit to humanity. It can also be an incredible problem, but that doesn't mean we just need to, because most people are, it's all or nothing, it's this or it's that, there's no middle ground, and that's not human. Human isn't either or. Human is always transcending. Human is, I'm going to take this idea and that idea, and I'm going to make something better. That's human. I think we need to return to being human and stop focusing on, technology is going to kill us. That's too primitive. Let's grow in our way of thinking. We can use this technology. We can put out amazing art, incredible educational art that really feels balanced, doesn't feel scare tactic and fear-mongering, and changes the narrative. And I think if you change the narrative, you've already changed the people. You've already changed their mind. If you can capture people with great logic and an amazing idea and a way that is not, this will make these people happy but not those people happy. If it's inclusive and it's fair, then I think we're on the up and up with all this technology. So I'm trying not to send too many scare signals up in the air, but I also know that if we're not diligent, I think we're on really, shaky ground. And if we're not diligent, we can very, very, very easily lose our footing. And the equivalent of that in the 5G world means we can microwave ourselves to death. We can lose our privacy. We could have massive job losses. We could have massive looting. We could have, massive issues just because people don't know how to handle the changes. So that's why I use my platform to speak about the coming world, its issues, its potential pitfalls, and the way through it. I'm all about the way. I think the way through this is human. Let's do what humans have always done and overcome obstacles. And the worst way of doing that is pitting human against human. We need to get over this divisiveness. It doesn't matter what the external excuse is. We should never be resorting to violence, vandalism, looting to make a point. That doesn't make a point other than we don't know how to handle our emotions, or we can't trust who's actually controlling these factions behind the scenes. I think we really need to grow up as a species, and I think we've never been in a better position to do that and had a better impetus for that than right here and right now.
You just did a fantastic job of answering my last question, which is going to be, is this a step forward for humanity or a step away from humanity? And you just did it very eloquently. Ben, we're out of time. Fantastic discussion tonight. You really know your stuff and you present it so well. It's easy to understand and it's very powerful. So thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Thank you so much for giving me the platform. I appreciate your program.
And I look forward to having you back on. And once again, Ben's website is Ben Joseph Stewart, and Stewart is spelled with a W. BenJosephStewart.com.
Beyond Reality Paranormal is hosted by JV Johnson and produced by Orion Palmer and Slick Eddie Edwards. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please consider supporting the program either through your podcast platform, click on the link in the description, or on Patreon at Joha Productions. If you'd like to be a guest on Beyond Reality Paranormal, or you have a recommendation for a guest, contact our producer, Slick Eddie Edwards. Eddie is spelled with a Y at slickeddieedwards@gmail.com.